The role of Incoterms in determining transportation responsibilities, risks, and costs. Supaquarium Private Limited recently joined a trade show in Europe, and James received many requests from potential customers for sales quotations. James is wondering how he should quote besides the price of his fish. How about these charges? Port charges in Singapore and the EU. Export and import customs documentation charges. Transportation cost from Singapore to EU. Local transportation charges in the EU, and other miscellaneous charges. To answer all these questions, one of his business associates advised that he needs to know Incoterms, international commercial terms. In 1919, a few entrepreneurs created an organization known as the International Chamber of Commerce, or the ICC, to represent businesses everywhere. In 1936, the ICC developed international commerce terms, or formalized international terms of trade, which specifies the responsibilities of the exporter and importer in an international transaction. The Incoterms rules have become an essential part of the daily language of trade. They have been incorporated in contracts for the sale of goods worldwide and provide rules and guidance to importers, exporters, lawyers, transporters, insurers, and students of international trade. There are 11 terms from the Incoterms 2010 edition. The following table shows these 11 Incoterms. Let's look at Incoterms DAT as an example. Supaquarium as an exporter is responsible to clear the goods for export and bears all risks and costs associated with delivering the goods and unloading them at the destination port or airport in Europe. His customer, the importer, is responsible for all costs and risks from this point forward, including clearing the goods for import at the named country of destination. So which Incoterm should James select? Could you help James by recommending an appropriate Incoterm? Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Excellent. But wait, managing transportation is not a game. Let's analyze. Product consideration. Supaquarium sells ornamental fish to Europe, and the only available mode of transportation is air. Thus, Incoterms like FAS, FOB, CFR, and CIF are not applicable as they are strictly for sea. Supaquarium's export knowledge and skills consideration. Supaquarium's market is mainly local. They have no experience in exporting fish overseas, especially to Europe. Thus, it is advisable for them not to take too many responsibilities in these transactions. D Incoterms like DAT, DAP, and DDP will not be suitable. Customers' import knowledge and skills consideration. Assumption is made that most of Supaquarium's potential customers are large distributors in Europe with huge experience in importing ornamental fish from Asia. Also, there are some large retailers who have much less importing experience. Considering the factors above, for large retailers, Supaquarium may use CPT or CIP. As for large distributors, EXW or FCA are more suitable. Mode selection. James now knows how to prepare his sales quotation, but how is he going to transport his precious fish to Europe? While Incoterms and documentation issues are fairly technical and their execution is methodical, transportation managers have the opportunity to be strategic and innovative when choosing transportation modes and carriers. These decisions must align with corporate strategies, control risk, and provide the required level of customer service. Also, the transportation cost generated must not push the total landed cost for products beyond a competitive level in the marketplace. The mode selection decision involves the exporter and/or the importer. Each party has the responsibility to choose the mode of delivery. Transportation managers must determine which single or combination mode suits best with the customer's requirements. This requires an analysis of what's best between mode capabilities, product characteristics, and transportation cost. However, the geographic distances and barriers involved in global trade may cause limited transportation mode. Let's look at transportation mode by capabilities for international trade. By truck. Trucks are the best for delivering goods within a country, district, or over land to the airport or port. High accessibility, low capacity, high cost, and short distance movement are the main characteristics of this mode. By rail. Rail transport is common for delivering goods within a country or from country to country within the same continent. As compared to a truck, it focuses on low-value and bulky products with long-distance movement. The transportation rate of rail is lower as compared to trucks. By air. Air transportation is the fastest mode over a long distance, especially when the goods are required urgently, perishable, or high value. It may be one of the most expensive modes of transport, but it is the best choice if delivery speed is the main concern. By sea. Freight shipping is one of the most economical ways to deliver goods, such as low-value raw material, bulk commodities, and containerized finished goods. Despite the high capacity, it is the slowest mode. By pipeline. Pipeline is mainly for movement of gas and liquid-type products, such as crude oil and natural gas. It has limited accessibility because of network restriction. So, which mode of transportation should Supaquarium use for its shipments to Europe? For fish, by sea, of course. The main concern of transporting ornamental fish is handling the stress, vibration, and sudden shock, potential heat stress, and deterioration of water quality. Fish need to be kept at a temperature of 18 degrees Celsius with dissolved oxygen. Due to possible delays in transportation, it is important to keep the transport water cool, fish biomass at an optimum, and additional oxygen. Thus, delivering by airplane with good packing conditions will ensure their survival and quality. Carrier selection is a two-step process. 1. A transportation mode is selected, and 2. A specific carrier is selected from the mode chosen. Carrier costs and service performance are important carrier selection determinants. Transportation cost was the predominant carrier selection determinant. It includes competitive rates, flexibility of rates, and billing accuracy. The service performance determinants cover several areas: reliability factors, geographic coverage, technical capability, the ability to handle any goods that require special care, extended logistics or transportation services, communication, security and safety, and vehicle and equipment. Given the total cost perspective of logistics, selection of a transportation mode on the basis of lowest transportation costs does not guarantee the lowest cost decision for the whole logistics system. Hence, transportation managers should not select carriers solely based on cost factor. In fact, service-related factors are often more important. In recent trends, carrier selection strategy commonly focuses on concentrating the buying of transportation with a limited number of carriers. This not only enables the shipper to become more important to the carrier, but also increase negotiating power. Using a small group of carriers, the shipper leverages its purchasing dollars for lower overall rates, while building relationships with carriers, and this is reflected by core carrier concept. In the case of Supaquarium, what are the key carrier selection criteria? The following are some criteria for consideration. 1. Reliability. The water quality will deteriorate, and the amount of dissolved oxygen will reduce as time goes by. Any delay in transportation will threaten the survival of the fish. Hence, the length and consistency of transit time are extremely important. 2. Technical capability. The carrier selected must be experienced in handling and transporting such ornamental fish. 3. Extended logistics or transportation services. Supaquarium will need advice from these experienced carriers on export packaging, as the fishes are required to be placed in a bag filled with 20% volume of water and 80% pure oxygen. Carriers should be familiar with the customs clearance in Europe to avoid unnecessary delays. 4. security and safety. Some of these ornamental fishes are of high value and pilferage may occur. Any loss and damage will result in lost sales and profit. 5. Competitive rate. Transportation rate need not be lowest, but it must be competitive enough for the market. Soup Aquarium must lower its landed costs to tap into the market. Reasons for and against outsourcing. James had decided the appropriate Incoterms and transportation mode to be used, but looking at the business operations, his company's key strength is in breeding ornamental fish, not in transporting and exporting. Should he outsource to third-party logistics service provider or 3PL to help him manage the transport operations? Let us help James analyze the situation and provide suggestions. Why Soup Aquarium should outsource its transportation. 1. Lack of expertise in transportation management and operations. 2. Many 3PLs in Singapore have the expertise Soup Aquarium require. To build such expertise, Soup Aquarium would require additional time and money in human resources and assets. 3. With the skills and experience in logistics, these 3PLs may help Soup Aquarium reduce their transportation costs and improve its logistical customer service level. 4. Soup Aquarium management can free themselves from dealing with transportation issues and focus on its key business areas. 5. Soup Aquarium can tap into 3PL's wealth of experience and expand its business to unfamiliar markets, as most 3PLs operate on regional or global scale. And 6. Soup Aquarium can benefit from the emerging and latest technologies invested by the 3PLs to improve their logistics management and operations. Why Soup Aquarium should not outsource its transportation operations. 1. Cannot control outsourced transportation functions and being over-reliant on 3PLs. 2. Service level commitments by 3PLs may not be realized or achieved. Many 3PLs cannot deliver their promises upon contract confirmation. 3. Soup Aquarium may not be able to build and manage relationship with 3PLs. Additional time and effort from top management are required in building and managing relationships. And 4. Information shared with 3PLs may leak to competitors. With these reasons, the management of Soup Aquarium should weigh the pros and cons before making the decision. Types of service providers. International shipping could present great business opportunities for Soup Aquarium, but the process, paperwork, and regulations involved may seem intimidating. However, Soup Aquarium can seek help from various third parties without getting caught up in the complexity of international logistics. Who are these third parties? 1. Third-party logistics service providers, or 3PL. Perform the management function of the shipper's inbound freight, customs, warehousing, order fulfillment, distribution, and outbound freight to the shipper's customer. 3PL frees the shipper from day-to-day interactions with carriers. DHL, Keeney & Nagel, DB Schenker, and Nippon Express are examples of large 3PL companies. 2. Transportation brokers are companies providing services in arranging and coordinating the transportation of products to both shippers and carriers. They charge a fee to the shipper, in return pays the carrier. Small and medium-sized shippers with personnel or resource constraints use brokers to negotiate rates and oversee shipments. In a small country like Singapore, transportation brokers do not exist as land transportation is easy to manage. 3. Freight forwarders help shippers navigate the complex global transportation by advising export costs and the most appropriate transportation mode, preparing and filing required export documentations, reserving necessary cargo space on a vessel, aircraft, train, or truck, arranging with overseas customs brokers to ensure that the goods and documents comply with customs regulations, consolidates small shipments from shippers into a large shipment moving to a region at lower rate. Freight forwarders are licensed by the International Air Transport Association, or IATA, and the Federal Maritime Commission to handle international air freight and sea freight respectively. 4. Non-vessel owning common carriers, or NVOCC, specializes in consolidating small shipments from shippers into a large shipment. Hence, in many countries including Singapore, freight forwarders and NVOCCs have become virtually the same over the years. But in a country such as the USA, there is a distinct difference between freight forwarders and NVOCCs. Freight forwarders do not issue bill of lading, while NVOCCs do. That means an NVOCC acts as the carrier to the shipper and is responsible for the loss and damage of cargo shipped. In comparison, a freight forwarder does not act as a carrier and is not responsible for the safety of the cargo. 5. Customs brokers represents the importer and exporter. They are knowledgeable in dealing effectively and efficiently with customs. In many countries, customs brokers are the only entities qualified to fill in the necessary paperwork to clear customs. However, it is not the case in Singapore and USA, where importers can clear the customs themselves. Now that you have understood the roles of these third parties, in your opinion, which third party should SuperAquarium approach? Well, since SuperAquarium will be shipping their ornamental fish in small volumes, a freight forwarder or an NVOCC would be suitable. However, if SuperAquarium requires more logistics services, such as warehousing, domestic distribution, order processing, and inventory control, then a 3PL would be more appropriate. Establishing and managing 3PL relationships. We have analyzed and concluded that SuperAquarium needs to outsource its transportation operations for its international transportation needs. The issue is, how does SuperAquarium establish and manage the relationship with these third parties? By adopting the suitable types of relationship, it provides a consistent way of interacting and managing carriers that promotes collaboration and continuous improvement. There are 6 specific types of relationships: arm's length, Type 1 partnership, Type 2 partnership, Type 3 partnership, joint ventures, and vertical integration. Each has its appropriate business application. The most common is the arm's length relationship, which is transaction specific. This relationship ends after a single transaction between 2 parties, and no commitments are made for future transactions. The single deciding factor in this relationship is price. An arm's length relationship is appropriate when the transportation is not important to the company's success. Example: Kaplan has an arm's length relationship with carriers, but long-term relationships with their partner universities. A Type 1 partnership is a short-term contractual relationship, for example 1 year, that requires little investment on the part of either party and has a limited scope of logistical activities involved. A Type 2 partnership is also covered by a contract with a lengthy and broader scope as compared to a Type 1 partnership. And a Type 3 partnership is not governed by a typical contract mechanism, as the relationship has no formal endpoint. Logistical assets in the relationship can be jointly owned, and the scope of logistical activities involved is substantial. Obviously, this type of relationship has high investment and high risk on the part of both parties. Joint ventures refer to a new separate company formed and invested by both partners. These relationships are normally the longest, as there is a need to recoup the initial investment. Vertical integration provides the transportation services internally or buys over a transportation company. In SuperAquarium's case, arm's length relationship is not suitable, as the risk of constant change in carriers is too high, even if a lower price is offered. Joint venture and vertical integration are also not appropriate, as SuperAquarium does not have much capital to invest. Hence, the most appropriate relationship is a partnership. Relationships can be developed from Type 1 partnership to Type 2 or even Type 3 if Superquarium finds it beneficial. It is found that a successful partnership relationship has these characteristics: joint planning as well as a buy-in to the concept by both parties, good communication and sharing of information, a true sharing of benefits and burdens, building trust and commitment, widen the scope of activities. Superquarium and its carriers have to work towards achieving these characteristics in order to reap the benefits from this partnership. Types of transportation insurance. Whether you are buying or selling goods in the international market, there is always the risk of goods being delayed, damaged, or lost in transit. Likewise, Superquarium has to decide if it needs to purchase cargo insurance for its shipments to overseas customers. Let's help James decide whether he should or should not buy cargo insurance. Okay, some of the key factors to be considered are: 1. Product values. Ornamental fish are of high value, thus, any loss or damage will have a financial impact. 2. Risk in transportation. High. A change of temperature or shock may cause the fish to die. Possible theft and loss may occur too. 3. Shipment value and frequency. If Superquarium seldom ships its fish to overseas and the value of shipment is low, it may not need insurance coverage, as any losses will be small and bearable. 4. Incoterms used. If Superquarium uses EXW, then the cargo liability falls onto the buyers. In this case, cargo insurance is not required. 5. Carrier limited liability. According to International Liability Convention, carriers only have limited liabilities for international transportation. In most cases, when they damage or lose the cargo, they are not reliable to compensate in the full amount. Looking at all these factors, it is in James' interest to buy cargo insurance. But what types of insurance to buy? There are two groups of cargo insurance. The first group, governed by British law, seems to have become the standard for other countries as well, known as the Institute Marine Cargo Clauses: Coverage A, Coverage B, and Coverage C. The second group is old and is mostly written by US-based insurance companies. These traditional policies are known as All Risks or AR policy, With Average or WA policy, and Free of Particular Average or FPA policy. Cargo Clause's Coverage A policy is similar to traditional All Risks policy. Under All Risk policy, all risks are covered, except those specifically excluded, like improper packing, inherent vice, ordinary leakage, unseaworthy vessel, acts of war, and seizure by government. Also, goods must be shipped under deck. This is appropriate for products that are shipped in containers. With Average policy. Generally, it is written to include coverage in between an All Risks policy and a Coverage B policy. It is a named perils policy that covers only perils listed in the policy and no others. Cargo Clause's Coverage B policy. Same as With Average policy, Coverage B policy is also a named perils policy. This policy is appropriate for goods with high tolerance for bad weather, like coal and lumber, but not suitable for finished goods. Cargo Clause's Coverage C. It is a named perils policy. However, it has less coverage of perils than Coverage B. This is the policy that meets minimum coverage required by Incoterms CIF and CIP. It is insufficient for most goods, however probably suitable for scrap metal or recyclable paper. Free of Particular Average coverage. It is also a named perils policy, but least coverage. It does not cover the minimum insurance requirements of CIF or CIP shipments. With the understanding of different cargo insurance policies, it is obvious that Superquarium should purchase either All Risk or Coverage A policy. Freight or shipping documents control the cargo on its journey from Singapore to its final import destination. Unlike domestic transactions, missing or incorrect paperwork for international transactions can cause delays and additional costs. This is particularly related to the expanded security regulation and attention paid to freight documentation. There are 4 types of documents: invoices, export, import, and transportation documents. Let's look at some of the key and commonly used documents. First is invoice. There are 2 types of invoices. 1. Commerce invoice, a bill for the goods from the seller to the buyer. It is often used by governments to determine the value of goods when assessing customs duties. And 2. Pro forma invoice. It is different from a commercial invoice, as it is not requesting for payment. Instead, pro forma invoices are commonly used as a quotation, customs or foreign currency exchange purposes in importation. Second are export and import documents. They are quite the same in nature, except one is for export and another is import. There are 3 types of export and import documents. 1. Import and export declaration or permit. It is important for Customs Office to accurately record export and import performance of a country. Thus, it is a must for exporter or importer to declare the goods shipped and its values to Customs. Key economic decisions are based on this trade statistic. 2. Import and export license. It is a document issued by a government agency to control and monitor controlled items, such as sensitive technologies, prohibited and dangerous materials. For Soup Aquarium to import and export ornamental fish, it needs to obtain a license from Agri-Food and Veterinary Authority of Singapore. 3. Certificate of Origin. This document, signed by the Exporters' Chamber of Commerce, states the origin country of the imported or exported goods. This is often used by importing countries to determine tariff of goods. Third, transportation-related document. There are 2 types. 1. Bill of lading is an international shipping document for sea freight. This document serves the following purposes: transportation contract between shipper and carrier, receipt for the goods issued by the carrier, and certificate or document of title. 2. Air way bill. It fulfills the same functions of bill of lading, but only for air freight. It is not a document of title. Thus, the cargo will always be delivered to the consignee stated on the air way bill. There are a few basic documents used for international trading and transportation. The complexity of these documentation is that different trades require different types of documents, and different countries have different requirements. For Soup Aquarium to export its ornamental fish smoothly to its overseas customers, they must research and prepare the document correctly, or outsource the documentation to third-party carriers, like freight forwarders or third-party logistics service providers. Service characteristics of motor carriers. In most countries, motors or trucks are mostly domestic means of transportation. Unlike Europe, more than 82% of merchandise shipped internationally within European Union are by trucks. There is a limited usage for motor because it only travels short distances. The major challenges are abiding different transportation rules set by different countries. In Europe, trucks are prohibited from operating on Sundays. Heavy traffic jams at border checkpoints, often seen at Singapore Causeway, poor road conditions, and high toll fee. The major advantage of motor carriage is its high accessibility and, distinctively, their ability to provide service to any location on land. Motor provides pickup and delivery services. The first and last mile delivery are usually done by motor. Thus, all other modes of transportation like air, sea, rail, and pipeline will eventually connect to motor to reach final destinations. As such, motor is referred to as the universal coordinator. Another service advantage is speed. For shipments going under 500 miles, motor carriers can deliver the goods faster than any other modes. Hence, you can see countless of trucks delivering vegetables and fish from Malaysia to Singapore every day. Compared to other modes, the smaller the motor vehicle shipping size, the lower the inventory levels are for the buyer and seller, lower inventory carrying costs, and more frequent services. It is not practical to use other transportation modes to support just-in-time inventory operations. Smoothness of transport is another positive service characteristic. Most road conditions in developed countries are well maintained. This damage-free journey reduces the packaging requirements costs. Motor transport also has a unique opportunity of providing door-to-door service for both passengers and freight. These multiple advantages have led motor to their market dominance for short-distance movement. The main disadvantage of motor carrier is its high cost, and products moved by truck must be of high value to sustain the transportation costs. Low-value products like commodities should utilize the rail as the transportation cost is much lower than motor carriers. Motor primarily transports high-value manufactured products, consumer and industrial goods. It may at times move substantial quantities of bulk materials, but only for short distances, and it is because the destination can only be accessed by motor. There are two types of motor carriers: private carriers and for-hire carriers. A private carrier provides truck transportation of its own cargo as part of a business that produces, uses, sells, or buys the cargo being hauled. Shangxiong Supermarket is a private carrier. They have their own trucks to distribute their products from central warehouse to all outlets. For-hire carrier is a company that provides truck transportation of cargo belonging to others and is paid for doing so, such as DHL, YCH, and ST Logistics. Rail transportation service in Singapore connecting Malaysia or vice versa is restricted and is not for local delivery. However, in large countries, rail contribution to freight transportation is significant. More than 40% of all cargo movement in the United States are by rail. However, less than 18% of international shipments within the European community are by rail. Reason being, Europe mainly focuses on passenger service instead of freight transportation. In Asia, rail moving across borders is uncommon. A 6,617-kilometer rail development project to link ASEAN with China is being planned. It will eventually link Singapore to Kunming in China and provide more environmentally friendly, efficient, and economical mode for passenger and freight transport. The railroad system has evolved into a system that primarily transports large quantities of heavyweight, low-value commodities or bulk products. The main products transported are coal, farm products, motor vehicles and equipment, and chemicals. Chemical products are classified as dangerous goods, hence safer to move by rail than motor. Constraints. Rail transport lacks the accessibility and flexibility of motor carriers because it is limited to fixed track facilities. As a result, rail provides terminal-to-terminal service rather than door-to-door services, unless companies have a rail siding at their facility, in which case service would be door-to-door. The on-time delivery performance and the frequency of service of rail have to be improved. Due to multiple handlings of cargoes at rail interchange terminals, it creates delays in delivery and increases the chance of damages. Another disadvantage is long transport time. Consolidating loads in terminal yards adds to the slow speed. The reliability of rail service is important to the logistics manager. Strengths. Rail transportation costs less than motor. A large capacity enables the railroads to handle large volume movements at low-value commodities over long distances. Motor, on the other hand, are constrained by its vehicle sizes, focusing mainly on small volume and lower weight cargo. Both rail and motor target different markets. Another important service is the liability for loss, and damage is usually assumed by the rail carrier. Such damage occurs because rail freight often goes through a rough trip due to vibrations and shocks caused by steel wheel on steel track. One area of strength is the use of trailer on flat car, or TOFC, and container on flat car, COFC services. Motor trailers or containers are delivered to the rail terminals, where they are loaded on flatbed rail cars. Containers may be single or double stacked on a single flatbed rail car. At the destination terminal, they are offloaded and delivered to the consignee by motor trailers. TOFC and COFC combines the line haul efficiencies of the railroads with the flexibility of local motor pickup and delivery service. This growth was stimulated by the advent of double-stack containers used in international trade. The unit train specializes in the transport of only one commodity, usually coal or grain, from origin to destination. The movement could be directly from a coal mine to an electric power generating station with no stops in transit, and loading and unloading would be accomplished while the train is moving. The role of transportation in logistics and customer service. Have you ever wondered how important is transportation to international logistics? Let's look at Soup Aquarium Private Limited, a local SME who rears and breeds ornamental fish like mollies, guppies, goldfish, and koi and sells them to the local market. The firm has been very successful in Singapore. However, the Singapore market is simply too small for them. They need to expand their market to overseas, but how to go about exporting this fish? The boss of Soup Aquarium, James, has no clue at all. Local delivery is simple, but moving fish across the border, there are many issues to be addressed. What are the commercial, transportation, and customs documents required to export the fish? What kind of packaging should be used, and on what mode of transportation? He certainly does not want to deliver dead fish to his customers. If the fish died during delivery, who is responsible, he or his customers? Who should be paying for all the relevant costs, like port charges, customs duties, and transportation charges? Let's first examine the roles of transportation from three perspectives. 1. Soup Aquarium Private Limited. 2. His customers. And 3. Logistics. Soup Aquarium Private Limited. James is concerned about the impact of transportation costs on the demand for his fish in overseas markets, specifically the landed cost. Landed cost of a product includes the cost of fish in Singapore, overseas transportation costs, plus any additional expenses such as insurance or loading costs. If the landed cost of his fish is lower than that of local competitors in overseas markets, Soup Aquarium has won the landed cost advantage and demand for his fish will skyrocket. The landed cost will also determine the extent of his business expansion in the market. The greater the distance of shipping, the higher the landed cost will usually be. At some distance from Singapore, the landed cost usually becomes too high to the overseas buyer, and therefore there will be no demand for his fish. Hence, lower transportation costs will help him expand wider into the overseas market. Soup Aquarium and his customers. Let's look at what James and his customers desire from the transportation services. Transit time, travel time. The longer the transit time, the higher the inventory levels his customers must hold. Reliability, the consistency of transit times. If Soup Aquarium fails to deliver the fish on time, his customers will have to keep more safety stock. Accessibility, the ability of the carrier to provide direct transportation service between an origin and destination. Failure to do so will result in added costs and transit time for Soup Aquarium. Capability, the ability of the carrier to provide special service requirements, like expert knowledge in transporting fish. And security, the safety of the goods in transit. Shipments that are damaged or lost in transit can increase inventory cost. Logistics. Transportation is a vital part of logistics. It contributes to logistics by providing time utility, place utility, and quantity utility. Time utility refers to having the fish available when they are needed by customers. Place utility refers to having the fish available where they are needed by customers. And quantity utility refers to having the fish in good condition without damage.